Poor schooling was one of the commonest reasons. Often the nearest school was a bus ride away in the next village. If there was no bus, the children just had to go on foot. Not many parents could afford bicycles for their children in those days. Secondary schools were few and far between. Many village elementary schools, like this one, were old, cold and short of space. Very often, several classes had to share the same room.
I started work at the age of 11 and have been slaving 40 years, and I'm not a penny better off than when I started. I would never persuade a boy of mine to go on a farm.
So farm workers had a lot to complain about. But what could they do about it? How much influence did their unions have?
There was very little bargaining power in the hands of farm workers at that time, mainly because of unemployment being so rife in the country as a whole. And in addition to that, the organization of farm workers had not taken its full effect. There were about, in the beginnings of the 30s, there were about 35,000 farm workers organized within the National Union of Agricultural Workers, as it was known at the time. And this increased in about 10 years, up to 1940, to about 53,000. So that this was a doubling of the organized workforce in that time.
At the outbreak of the Second World War, the government organized farming from the start. Overnight, farm workers were as important to the nation as the forces at the front. Dig for victory became the most familiar slogan of the war. Hitler lost no time sending U-boats to destroy Allied shipping. To cut down shipping space for food to Britain, farms were expected to grow as much bulky food, corn and potatoes, as they could. Farmers were paid to clear waste land. They were helped to repair drains and to patch up farm buildings. Tractors began to replace horses. All the land that had not been farmed since the 1870s was brought back into use, and more besides.
The immediate effect on farm workers was that their rate of pay was increased to 48 shillings per week. In modern money, it would be £2.40. And in the farmer's case, the situation so changed that everything that he could grow was wanted by the nation, and he was instructed to produce to the maximum. Morale was greatly improved. It was improved because there was a sense of men's output and women's output and farmers' output being wanted by the nation.
As the Second World War came to an end, many farmers feared a return of pre-war conditions. But this time, the world was short of food. The government decided to continue to support farmers and farm incomes. What do we mean by farm income? In the 50s, the farmer received money from two sources. First, in the ordinary way of business, he got money from the sales of grain, milk, and livestock. And second, from the government, he got subsidies and grants. Out of this total sum, he had to pay for labour, rent, machinery, feeding stuffs, seed, fertilizer, and so on. The money left over was his income, payment for his work and profit on his investment in the farm. In the 50s, this income wasn't much more than the money the government was paying him. In fact, the government was really keeping him going with taxpayers' money. But by the late 50s, subsidies and grants had gone down, while the farmer's income had gone up. Farmers were becoming self-supporting. Many were earning more than 4 times their pre-war incomes. What share did farm workers have in this new prosperity? The Agricultural Wages Act of 1948 laid down greatly improved rates of pay, holidays, working conditions, and so on. This brought them up a good deal closer to workers in industry than they'd ever been before. British farming is now one of the most mechanized systems in the world. Farming research has brought about great improvements in animal breeding and plant breeding, so that only the best are maintained in the farming industry. Because farms are now more efficient, they need even fewer workers than they did between the 2 world wars. Nowadays, only 3% of Britain's working people are engaged in farming. Many country cottages which once housed farm workers and their families have been taken over by retired folk and by people who work in the towns. Where will the story of British farming go from here? One or two trends are becoming clear. There's been a tendency towards bigger farms, and perhaps the small family farm will disappear unless today's soaring land prices level out. In 1973, we joined the common market. Now we're part of a wider farming community, a new experience for us all. But whatever happens, one thing is sure: the British farmer will still have nature to reckon with.
Unfortunate man, the conclusion is only too plain, that nature is just an elaborate plan to annoy him again and again. Oh dear, dearie, dear me, he'll never be happy again, for nature is just an elaborate plan to annoy him again and again. But you cannot go wrong if you stick to this song and assume that his heart's in his boots, for either the rain is destroying his grain or the drought is destroying his roots. Oh dear, dearie, dear me, he'll never be happy again, for either the rain is destroying his grain or the drought is destroying his roots.